Universe.
Since the 1980s, hip-hop magazines have been very prevalent in the magazine world within America. There are tons of different genres, of course, but hip-hop is a pretty big standout, such as the Source magazine, the Fader magazine, XXL's magazine. Being a magazine still up and running in today's times has proven to be very difficult, as most people get their information online. One magazine that knew this was Complex magazine. Over the years, Complex has had scandals, misinformation spread from their own journalists, and controversies that rarely get spoken about in media. And today, I'll be getting into a little bit of that. Complex has been on a true mission to keep up the act that they're the quote-unquote biggest media platform on the internet. Literally could not be farther from the truth, by the way.
One of the people I most enjoyed catching up with was Rich Antoniello, CEO of Complex Media.
I believe we're very good at seeing the future. And being very predictive and hedging your bets. We've done that both on a tactical level as well as high level strategy. And I wanted everybody to kind of think and realize, like, I don't know if you remember the terminology that the little explanation I used is,
for a very long time, I've been keeping up with what goes on in the music industry from Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, even Tumblr at times. And for a while, that's how I was able to be so tapped into things before I, eventually just went off to do my own research, kind of like what I did for this video, actually. And throughout my research of things that pertain to music, especially hip hop, one of the most prominent media companies that often comes up when you're looking for information is Complex's publications. This is especially due to them writing an article anytime some form of a public figure takes a shit. Now, because I pay very close attention to a lot of things that involve my research, I'm pretty meticulous about where I'm getting my information from, especially since my audience likes to call me out on my bullshit at times, which is fair. But I guess me admitting to using Complex's articles for some of my videos is ass backwards, seeing as Complex is one of the biggest spreaders of misinformation in the entire media space. Not as bad as Say Cheese or Rap TV, but not great nonetheless. Complex was regarded as one of the biggest media companies for a very long time, and still, you could honestly say is one of the biggest media companies, with forms of interviews and original shows like Sneaker Shopping, Goat Talk, that 360 show with that dude that I think is Hispanic or something, I don't know, Speedy Mormon, whatever his name is. Sometimes they throw something at the wall and it sticks. Other times, it doesn't.
If your sales team could sell anything, we wouldn't have a problem. Everything would be great. Sorry, Complex, you cannot continue to tell me that Out of Bounds is more profitable. You cannot continue to tell me that Blueprint is more profitable. You cannot continue to tell me that Sneaker Shopping is more profitable. Guess what? Even if it is, I don't give a fuck.
If they post it and they make it go viral, because the negativity goes viral, put this on Complex. I will tattoo Complex on my ass. On my ass cheek. I swear to God.
Marc Ecko was born August 29th, 1972, making him a Virgo. Gross. In New Jersey. He's a fashion designer and former CEO, basically an entrepreneur. The nitpicky details about his, come up in his life really don't matter, except for the fact that before Complex even became a thing by Marc, he actually established an entire brand before called Ecko Unlimited, which I'm almost certain you've seen before at some point. If you aren't familiar, this brand was everywhere in the early to mid 2000s. Also, if you aren't familiar, you're probably under 12 years old, I guess. Marc Ecko was already running it up, and in 2002, he would begin Complex magazine, which back then had a completely different spin on it. Complex at this point was much more about a man's perspective on media and hip hop, kind of like Spike TV. You know how it's like, oh, this is about men and what real men want,
Gay. Yeah, okay.
But no, all jokes aside, Complex at this point was very, very different. I mean, look at this. It's eye-catching for sure. The magazine was just a dream. We initially wanted to call it Climate. Alan Kett, who was the founding editor for the magazine, said that we looked at other men's magazines to see what wasn't being done for men in the US. There was Details and GQ, but they were older and whiter. Which, even though Marc Ecko or Alan Kett is not black, it eventually became fully geared towards hip-hop in a short span of just 2 years. Which is fine, I guess. But looking at the way Complex started out, it almost seemed like it was supposed to be more of like a hustler type vibe going on. Seeing as they're still going, I guess wouldn't have been that bad. But Complex eventually began to go down the route that in their root early days swore up and down they wouldn't go down. Now granted, what I'm referring to is way down the road and honestly doesn't have much to do with Marc Ecko or Alan Kidd. But long story short, the early days of Complex were a lot more difficult as print was very expensive. People were wondering if they were going to get fired or not to keep the budget in line, trying to come up with ideas to even put in the magazine, you know, real hectic. Skipping over all the semantics, over time, this magazine became serious. But the way the magazine was marketed, it wasn't for everyone. I mean, at the top of the cover, it clearly says that this magazine is the original buyer's guide for men. LOL. So eventually, over time, with the whole new editor-in-chief Noah Callahan Bever, this men's only vibe was slowly pushed to the back with that slogan, original buyer's guide for men, being a lot smaller instead of sticking out like a sore thumb. Now, you know, this direction makes a lot of sense, seeing as why would you only want one specific demographic to rock with your product? Because it's not just men that are into hip-hop, different forms of culture, or streetwear, and overall interesting news. You know, that may have been how it started out, but they were pushing into a new era and understanding that there's more money to be made in a media that everyone can consume. This, you know, got pushed back. Now, Marc Ecko was still a part of the magazine at this time, but as the CEO, you know, you gotta hand it off to people you trust your business with. You're not gonna be solely doing everything anymore at this point. It's a whole company. Keep in mind that Marc literally runs Ecko Unlimited as well. Budgeting, thinking of ideas to bring the magazine into more hands, you're doing all that stuff, so that's why the magazine seemingly shifted in a completely different direction in the mid to late 2000s. It became less about what men want and desire, and smartly became about what everyone wants and desires. Now, going down this path is cool, but the problem is that Complex sort of became the BuzzFeed of hip-hop the more and more they shifted in this direction, and it's very apparent in their media company, which we're going to get into in a little bit. So in 2012, which would be the 10-year anniversary for Complex, it was well established with a Kanye cover, Kim Kardashian, Seth Rogen, and RZA. For some reason, basically everything was great, and the YouTube channel still hadn't started yet. Now keep in mind, while business is booming or whatever, there was this thing going on called the economic crash. Ironically enough, it's still going on. And while this is going on, I couldn't find exactly who, but I'm sure a lot of heads went into this, but Complex Media launched in 2007, because at this point, magazines are still making money, but we were heading into that, you know, digital age. Keep in mind, 2007 is the same year that the iPhone came out. Some YouTube nerd needs to do like a really deep dive on 2007 as a year itself, because a lot of stuff was happening that year. It's also the same year Tumblr came out. Anyway, Complex was ahead of the game and decided, hey, we gotta get with the times instead of just solely focusing on printing and whatnot. This is how Complex Media was born. Now, admittedly, we'll get into their YouTube in a little bit, but what most people today really know Complex for on a base level is their YouTube channel. Now, I don't know why, but while working on this video, I thought the YouTube channel started in 2016, but there's videos on that channel from 2011, so I guess it's some sort of weird YouTube glitch. And I was just like, I thought they would have started way earlier, but they were on YouTube at least from 2011. And you know, at this point, they're really taking advantage of the fact that nobody's doing hip hop media as an actual internet outlet as much as they were, you know, all the way back in 2011 on YouTube. Now, 2016 was actually the last year that Complex dropped issues for their magazine, completely shifting over to digital media in its entirety because of a couple of different reasons. The biggest reason is that Complex as an entire company received a $21 million investment from Hearst, which is a media company that works with CNN, ABC. These folks got money. The new ownership then converted the brand to Complex Networks, which is a focus on videos, which would, you know, explain why the magazine pretty much ended and a whole bunch of people got fired. You know, when this happened, this pretty much took out the magazine's art, marketing, sales, and editorial departments. Basically, the magazine was just like finished. In the release to Billboard, Hearst put out a statement saying, as Complex embarks on a rapid expansion of premium video creation across the company's networks with a growing list of distribution partners, the company is reallocating certain positions to address its content needs. We're deeply committed to the ongoing evolution of our brand and our long-term plan to be a leader in digital video entertainment. While we're reducing staff in some areas, we plan to increase to meet our needs in others. That PR ass statement. And then came the Complex YouTube channel. Now this isn't the only channel they have, because they also have Complex News, which is now defunct, and Complex Australia, which is also defunct. See a pattern? Don't worry, we'll get into it. Complex starts this YouTube channel, and in the early days they were uploading behind the scenes footage of their shoots with people like Justin Bieber, Katy Perry, Kim Kardashian. So this is still heavily leaning on the magazine's content, obviously just in a video format. Now looking all the way back here, I didn't know that the first ever sneaker shopping episode before it was even a show had Jim Jones on it. That's wild. I don't know why. What's even wilder is that Joe Puma was on this too, meaning Joe Puma has been hosting sneaker shopping since 2011, which is just wild, bro. Like, that's a long time to be with the company. I mean, they gotta be paying him good at this point. The dude's been on Jimmy Fallon, so shouts out to Joe Puma. Anyway, the early days of the channel were interesting because they were still driven in a direction that sort of had to do with the magazine, but they were still leaning into hip-hop driven content. But with Hearst now in the picture, you could tell that they were trying to lean into other stuff as well. Stuff that had nothing to do with the main plot line, such as Big Freedia teaches Complex how to twerk. Okay.
This Big Freedia the Queen Diva, you best to believe her. I'm here at Complex, and I'm about to teach y'all how to shake. Girl down.
A video where for some reason actual Complex employees are trying to shake their ass on camera. Never thought I would say that in a sentence. The only comment on this video, by the way, is just some guy saying lame. Which is fair because, like, who greenlighted this? I actually want to know. This is so stupid. So as you can tell, seeing as this video was uploaded in 2014, Complex was already on a strange path to losing the plot. Now, one of their earliest shows that was actually a pretty good idea in my opinion was called The Neighborhood, which is basically where artists would take Complex and the viewers to where they grew up and basically speak about their early lives and experiences, you know, things of that nature. This concept of taking things back to their roots is actually pretty interesting, and it's within the plot lines of whatever Complex wanted to be at this point. And seeing as most of the episodes were about, you know, artists, specifically rappers, Nipsey Hussle, Lil Durk, A$AP Ferg, Danny Brown, you can kind of figure out on your own that Complex was clearly leaning on the hip hop thing for their earlier media content. I just said that Jim Jones was on the first episode of Sneaker Shopping, back when they couldn't even rent out the damn place for themselves, and it was all janky with people literally still shopping in the background. Like, Complex knew what people were interested in. That's what was one of the good things about Complex. In fact, in the earlier days of Complex, other than there were actually a lot of good shows and videos. You can tell they were still getting their footing in the media game with short form interviews that actually had more of a non-campy, non-media feel to them. It kind of felt like Adult Swim like shorts, which with it being hip-hop themed, I mean, yeah, that's kind of the whole point, and you could kind of tell that in their earlier content. One thing that I remembered out of nowhere was that one of Donald Glover's, or Childish Gambino, whatever you want to call him, earliest short films ever was actually uploaded on Complex. With this being in 2014, it honestly seems like whatever this short film was somehow turned into Atlanta, especially with the whole vibe of it. You should actually give it a watch, it's cute. Complex's early content is definitely hip-hop driven. Like, their feet was definitely in the pool with it. You had the Combat Jack show, rest in peace by the way. You had Sneaker Shopping, which started out hip hop related at least. Even their behind the scenes videos of music videos was pretty cool, with one of them being that deleted Finesse video by Lucky, which was on Complex of all places. Complex was really doing their thing, and being tapped into hip hop for as long as I have, you definitely knew about Complex, and whether or not you respected them, at least they seemed to be tapped in themselves. Now later down the road though, something shifted on the Complex channel. Hot Ones was already being uploaded at this point, which the popularity for that show has skyrocketed since it first came out, but I would say the true shift in Complex as far as popularity was Everyday Struggle. Now the process of doing Everyday Struggle was nothing new at all actually. It was basically a talk show for hip hop, nothing super original, but What made it so interesting was the fact that you had DJ Academics and Joe Budden on there. Don't get me wrong, Nadeska did her thing being the mediator between these two, but this show was just very interesting to watch as far as their dynamic went and their takes on things that were going on at the time. The dynamic between these two felt like Shannon Sharp and Skip Bayless at times, and it was just genuinely one of the most entertaining pieces in hip-hop at the time. These two had their own thing going on well before Everyday Struggle, and seeing them clash heads and agree on something or make funny jokes about something going on, it was entertaining to say the least. And you know, when people kind of already know about something but then a certain thing happens and it shoots up in popularity, Everyday Struggle was that thing for Complex. Now, I don't want to sit on this for too long, but there are so many memeable things that came from this show where if you've absolutely never heard of Complex, you've at least seen one of these clips from Everyday Struggle or something that has to do with Everyday Struggle one time before.
Everybody know Drake stole my flow, bro, and that's the end of it.
He took a line from you and you took the same line from another nigga.
And you fat as fuck and nigga shut the fuck up, man.
Yeah, you don't sound like you very aware with what's going on, and you one of the hottest niggas on earth.
But what do you want me to say? You want me to say?
I want you to be aware of your business. I want you to know whether you in a 360 or not. I want you to appreciate the culture that changed your life and took you from college dorm rooms eating fucking oodles and noodles. I want you who's well spoken and articulates himself well.
My nigga. Chill.
Yeah, hold up. Chief Keef didn't like me. Dirk didn't like me. I mean, I think they grew to understand that the content was not just negative, right?
No, it was clowny. It was just negative, man.
No.
Like, come on, boy.
You don't think it was nothing constructive about it?
There was nothing constructive about it, and I'm gonna tell you the truth. I really think you're a bitch. Because
in what sense?
Because so it's fairly safe to say that this show was impactful, to say the least. The viewership for the show was crazy too, especially when something big happened in hip-hop at the time. I'd say for the time it was being filmed, it was doing like crazy numbers. Alright, I guess now is a good time to get into why Complex failed Everyday Struggle and why Complex is one of the weakest forms of hip-hop media. And truthfully, I'd say it started when Everyday Struggle's cast became more strained. Now, admittedly, it was very difficult trying to pinpoint exactly where the shift in Complex started because they were doing bullshit as far back as 2014. But it was definitely when Joe Budden left Everyday Struggle, in my opinion. Now, this was when, if you were an avid viewer of the show, you could tell Joe didn't really want to be there anyway. And the short answer as to why he left would be incited as, quote, internal chaos. However, a more in-depth reason he left was because
Noah, along with Elliot, along with some other people, understand how this show came to fruition. There wasn't very much to negotiate when I created this show because I just created a show. I mean, it wasn't profitable at all. As a creator, I went into this venture with a vision for what it could become. What it quickly became was the best hip-hop show ever, in my opinion. I'm biased. I'm biased.
I think that's accurate.
I don't think ever before in hip-hop there has been a show where they just giving it up like that. And I do credit that to Ak as well. That dynamic between the three of us on that screen does not exist without everybody playing a part. I think that part from day one was disregarded and ignored by whoever it is that is running Complex.
You can go watch the entire thing for yourself, but that right there would show you, if you're paying attention, that Complex, as most companies usually are, only care about the money. What do we gain from this? What does this do for me as a company? Not the integration of the dynamic between the people at Complex. What made Everyday Struggle so great was hit on the head with what Joe said. The dynamic between the three of them was very crucial to what made that show so good. Go in the comments of the first episode with Star on it, who became the third after Joe was gone. Very safe to say that it took a huge toll on viewership when Joe left. And side note, this was probably the best move Joe made for his own career because he absolutely skyrocketed after he left Everyday Struggle, but that's neither here or there. We're talking about Complex's lack of understanding how the true media game actually works. The reason Complex Media is actually just, what's the word I'm looking for here? Mid. The long and short of summing up Complex could be as simple as this, guys. Academics' YouTube channels at that point, and even right now, 7+ years later, still get more views than Complex and Complex News combined. Complex News Remember, the channel that is now defunct? They literally gave up. The people at Complex, really the machine and Hearst, not at this current moment because it's been sold, but they don't really understand how to YouTube. Because their online publications are okay, quote unquote, for the most part, but that's not even the point. Academics alone makes higher numbers than a multimedia giant like Complex, at least on YouTube. And I mean, as a company, bro, that's crazy. With that said, Joe leaving Everyday Struggle was a big L for Complex on the media side. A big number of viewers started watching their show because of Academics. At that point, Ak had his own thing going on, like I already said, with his audience that he brought to the show. But they continued watching it because of Joe. When they took away Joe, and we later down the road found out why, that showed people how Complex as a company truly works. It's not about the people, it's about keeping our money. And the big machine company look, that's not great in hip-hop media, but that's not the only reason Complex is a shitty company. If we want to get into that, I can look up a couple of different situations that have happened over the years that Complex has just tried to swipe under the rug. And while looking up some of the fuckery that Complex has been involved with, there were multiple deleted threads about things such as "My silence ends today," whatever in God's name that means, an assault claim, not the Chris Brown kind or the Can kind, the Bill Cosby kind, one deleted thread about not smiling enough, which what I'm about to say has nothing to do with Complex, but I don't like that certain companies have this "guys, make sure you put on your best smile for the customer" ass mentality. I actually despise that so much. I'm not gonna lie, like my resting face is very mean looking, so I don't be smiling like that. And I remember one time I worked at Chick-fil-A and my boss came up to me and was like, "You need to smile more." This was like 2017 or something like that. I looked that man dead in his face and said, "You need to pay me more." And it would be a healthy guess if you said that I quit that job just a few weeks later. But long story short, that smiling shit, just because you're around people, is so stupid to me, because some people just naturally have an unapproachable look to themselves, and my smile is not gonna make you any more money, bro. Sell better stuff and pay the employee more, and maybe I'll have something to smile about. I'm sorry. Anyway, racism accusations, 30-year-olds trying to sleep with 17-year-old interns. Yeah, Complex is, And I mean, looking at Complex now, it just has a different vibe to it. With the company being sold at least 3 different times in the last 6 years, it's safe to say Complex is dead. But truly thinking about it from a non-biased standpoint, Complex was goated at one point, man. I'm not gonna lie, like, I remember coming home from school and watching some Everyday Struggle with my own struggle meal, which was either noodles with hot sauce or cereal. There's nothing adversely really wrong with Complex now, they're just not what they used to be. Even after the large amounts of controversy and the company not really being notable in the community, the thing about Complex is that they've already done what they needed to do. Is it wrong to title this video "The Day Complex Died" or whatever I made the title? No, not really, because Complex's legacy is solidified, but today, they truthfully just hold no weight. A bit earlier in the video, I said that Complex is the BuzzFeed of hip-hop media. That wasn't a compliment. It means, will they get an erection? Yeah. But what's the point of the interactions if it holds no value? At one point, Complex held a lot of value in their publications, and their shows like Goat Talk isn't all that bad. The only thing though is that they're gonna be a company and continue to be a company solely because of what they've done in the past and the amount of money they've made. But today, it's actually kind of hard to pinpoint who's making a true impact on hip-hop right now as far as the media goes, because to be honest, this internet media consumerism just moves so unbelievably fast. Why would Complex stop? It's a rat race, and they're just another rat with a legacy being lost in the deep space of hip-hop content. They're still running in that race though. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. I'm UVXEX. I love y'all. Later.